Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day, there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to be talking about something today that pertains to every single person. We're going to be talking about leadership and how to be a good, a great, a fantastic leader, not a leader, right? Or worse, a bad leader. And it pertains whether you are the head of a company, whether you are a volunteer, whether you are, say, a parent, right? Because you're leading your family. And so please join me in welcoming my guest today. So welcome to Bruce Mayhew. Welcome, Bruce. How are you?
I am great, Deb. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to be here for all of your listeners. I'm really excited.
I love it. Well, I'm going to tell folks a little bit more about you, and then we will jump into this. So Bruce Mayhew helps leaders and teams intentionally build high-performing cultures based on trust, transparency, and respect. He enjoys helping leaders improve employee engagement, employee loyalty, productivity, and customer satisfaction, and reach their personal, professional, and organizational goals in an AI-powered world. We're probably going to talk about that a little bit. Bruce is a keynote speaker, corporate trainer, and author with interviews on CBC, CTV, Global Toronto, The Morning Show, and he has written articles published in Huffington Post, The Globe and Mail, and Fast Company magazine. He has over 11 years of leadership experience working at one of Canada's top 5 banks, with over 20 years experience helping people and organizations succeed. Bruce's debut book, The Path of an Inspired Leader, Inspire Greatness, Lead with Integrity, and Build a Loyal Team Culture, was released earlier this year in February. So again, Bruce, welcome.
That was awesome. That's great. Thank you for that.
Isn't it always fun to hear our own bios, right?
It is wild. My mom would just be thrilled.
I know. Well, I always like to ask my guests, how did you get to where you are today?
That's a great question. It was a journey I wasn't expecting, to be sure.
Okay.
When I was younger, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided to go back to school. I actually took some time off and then went back to university. And that's when I started playing around with the things that I wanted to do. And I have to give my parents credit, because they never forced me into anything specific. They were never big pressure people. And so they just let me play around. So I went into sciences, I went into HR, I went into psychology. Like I really messed myself around and just played where I liked to do things. Like when I saw some stuff, I just leaned into that, and ended up with a degree in economics and a minor in English literature.
That's a good combination.
Again, not intentional. It was just things that I was finding I enjoyed. And then, but near the end of school, I decided that I wanted to work for a bank for my whole career, like all of it. And coming out of university, I had a summer job with one of the banks in up here in Canada, and they asked me to come back, and so I did. And so when I graduated, I started working for Scotiabank, and really loved that process. Had amazing bosses, had amazing leaders. When you have an amazing leader, you just half the time you don't realize it. You don't realize how good things are until you get the boss that you just really Yeah, and my last 2 years at Scotia, I had that boss that you just don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was, in retrospect, I'm so glad because it got me to move,
Mm-hmm.
right? It got me to change my whole trajectory. And so I left Scotia. It took me 2 years to leave once I decided that it was time to go. It took me 2 years because I had to change what I was doing. I share that with younger people nowadays, and they're like looking at me like, I decided to leave, and 2 weeks later I was out the door.
Right.
You know, but 30 years ago, 20 years ago, that was a very different experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started following my ambitions again. I started following my curiosity again. And I realized that what I wanted to do was help other leaders not be the leader that I left.
Mm-hmm.
And that became, it slowly sort of migrated into my goal,
Mm-hmm.
is to help leaders be amazing leaders,
Mm-hmm.
and frankly help employees be amazing employees, because
Mm-hmm.
nowadays we are all leaders
Right.
in at some point, right? It might be 10 minutes in the meeting down, on Thursday, that we're the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it changes all the time nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And so my real goal nowadays is to help people be amazing at whatever they choose to be at.
Mm-hmm. Right. I love that. And it is so true. Everyone is a leader in some way. And like you said, maybe it's, they are responsible for a team meeting. Maybe they're responsible for the company. Whatever it is, you have to have those skills that are there. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is thinking that the title, president, director, vice president, whatever it is, manager, owner, founder, we could go on and on and on, automatically makes you the leader. And it doesn't, yeah, it gives you that title, but we've all, I love the companies where you can tell that the assistant or whoever is actually the leader. But give us your definition of a leader.
Uh, I love that lead up, Deb, because a title will give you power,
Mm-hmm.
but it won't give you authority,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the second that you don't have that title, your authority, your influence disappears,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I believe that a leader is the person that people trust, that people respect,
Mm-hmm.
that people feel some desire to be around. They're the person that people feel safe, that they're not going to be thrown under the bus,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's the person who can gather respect and share respect, that is going to be the person that has influence and the person that has authority,
Mm-hmm.
that goes beyond just their title.
Mm-hmm.
That is the definition of what I would say is
Mm-hmm.
a leader. I could get a lot more polished around all of that. You could go in and look up dictionary versions of definitions, but really it's the person that other people trust,
Mm-hmm.
respect, admire,
Mm-hmm.
right? But know that they're going to be safe around,
Mm-hmm.
right? And know that they're going to be talked well of if they're not in the room. It's all of the emotional components that leadership 30 years ago
Mm-hmm.
tried to sweep under the rug,
Right.
right?
Because, we don't want fluffy. We don't want soft. We don't,
You don't
you
want
have to be
feelings.
the Lee Iacocca, tough, or maybe Eisenhower, right? Do, right? And the opposite is true, as you've been saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like when I started working at Scotia, when I was like in those early days, the culture, and it was culture everywhere. It wasn't Scotia, because Scotia was actually a brilliant place to work. Like it was really a great family unit. throughout the company.
Mm-hmm.
But in business 30 years ago, the idea was you leave your emotions at home
Mm-hmm.
and you come to work and you work,
Mm-hmm.
right? So anything for the most part that dealt with family or crisis or bad day or any of that stuff that happened at home stayed at home.
Mm-hmm.
And we now know that people aren't uh they don't have those two components. They don't have a switch that you can turn on and off. So if I have had a great experience at home, a great morning with my
Mm-hmm.
kids, and I come to work, I'm going to be positive and exciting, and I'm going to bring that energy. And if something really bad happened at home or bad happened on my way into work,
Right.
that energy is going to
Mm-hmm.
be there as well.
Mm-hmm.
You have to accept it,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to allow that. I have to see it. I have,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to make it the center of my day,
Right.
but hey, I might need to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it for 10 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and then we can
And
get
then go
on,
on. Right. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's we're people,
Mm-hmm.
and we're full of feelings and emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and we're excitable, and we need to embrace all of that. And the more that we can embrace that, the more we actually bring our true selves to work. And we're amazing, creative, inspiring, dynamic people.
Mm-hmm.
Man, invite all of that
Right.
into your
Mm-hmm.
workspace,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not to say that the leader, the person in charge, the whoever doesn't have to be tough. They do.
Oh,
They have
yeah.
to make the tough decisions. I think one of my favorite sayings is the buck stops here.
Mhm.
And that though is one of the harder things for people to deal with. We don't want to because I think in some cases the pendulum maybe has swung a little too far. We want to empower all of our employees. We want to make sure that they're being heard. And I've of course put a tone in my voice. But sometimes we can go too far, and decisions do need to be made, good and bad. People need to be fired. Sometimes clients need to be fired. People are like, "Wait, you fire clients?" Yes, I fire clients.
Mhm.
But those are really hard things to do. And I think even for kind of the hardcore business leaders that feel like, you can't have those emotions, I think maybe part of it is they're too tough, too rough. And that wears on them also. Because I still remember one time I had an employee and I was going to have a difficult discussion with him. And he was also a friend. And we're going to talk about that because that's always entertaining, right?
Mhm.
And I had been told to fire him, and by my higher ups, and I said no. Let's see if we can work through this. And I brought him to tears. I mean, the situation. Oh my gosh, I felt like something that gets stuck on the bottom of somebody's shoe, but I held my ground, and because more importantly, it wasn't the company. It was I needed to think about what is best for him going forward. He needed to know that his behavior, whether it was with our company or with somebody else, was not acceptable. And so I held my ground, and he turned out to, be a great employee. Everything, the ship got righted. But, how do we deal with having those tough discussions with people?
Sure. I think there's a few things I need to go on, but I would say that there's two things that are really important to having tough conversations. And I do a lot of work around difficult conversations training. Like, so I'm in that swimming pool a fair amount, right? And but so there's two things that are really important. One of them we've talked about, and one of them you've already referred to. So one, trust is huge,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And the example you just shared, your friend trusted you enough to listen, right?
Right.
So they were able to accept the information that you shared, but know that your intentions were for their best interest, right? So you weren't blaming them, you weren't condemning them, you weren't, raking them over the coals. You were there as both a friend and a business associate that they trusted. And so they were able to hear the information that you shared. Now, getting to the feeling component, it brought them to tears. And it probably brought them to tears for a lot of different reasons. They were probably embarrassed.
Yep.
Right? They were probably a little surprised. They were probably dealing with some other emotional baggage that you had no clue of. Right? So maybe it was some family stuff that happened 20 years ago, right? It doesn't matter. But they had an emotional experience. Your best job at that point is to sit with it, right? Not try to console them. You're just there to sit with them and let them have that experience. They just needed to have that. But trust was a big component with that. The other thing that I see over and over and over again is the accountability component, right? And that is critical from a difficult conversations perspective. Now, here's the thing, though. Accountability runs two ways, right? Accountability, when things go well, I have to give that to you fully. Right. I have to hold you accountable for when things go great. So when things go great,
it's okay.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not saying like throw out banners and balloons and like we don't have to take it out in the front page of the newspaper, but saying, hey, Deb, that was a great report that you handed in. And I really just awesome. Thank you, Deb, for that. That was so helpful. Or that point that you brought up in the meeting is exactly the kind of stuff that we're looking for. So Deb, thank you for doing that. Like that, I just really appreciate that. Accountability is just recognizing when someone has contributed, right? And it used to be like 30 years ago, hey, that was just your job. So I didn't have to bring it up.
It was expected that you did it, right?
Yeah. But no, and like accountability, just tell people when they did a great job, right? Or when they've contributed. And then accountability on the other side starts getting easier. But here's the thing about accountability. I need to have a conversation with you, Deb, before any of that happens. So if your first day or my first day, hey, maybe I'm a leader and I'm just joining a team. And if I can go to that team and say, guys, gals, I'm looking here, we're going to do some great stuff. I'm really excited to be here. And here's what you can trust with me, that I'm going to have your back all the time, right? And you have to, you have to prove it at that point. But here's the other thing, guys and gals, is that I'm going to do my best to point out when you guys are great. But here's the other thing, is that if there's a miss, if we make a mistake, if we could have done something better, right? I'm going to point that out as well. And I'm not going to do it from a blame perspective. I'm here to make all of us better. So when things go wrong, I'm going to be looking at how we can make things better. Right. And what I want to invite you guys to do is that when I do something wrong, I want to invite you to bring that to me as well. So that's my promise to you and my invitation to you, that we're going to have these conversations and they're going to be respectful. They're going to be safe. They might be difficult sometimes. They might be uncomfortable sometimes. It might be stuff that we don't want to hear. But if we're going to share, we're going to share all of this so that we can be better tomorrow.
Right. And I think it's so important for us as the leader to say when we've done something wrong ourselves, to fess up to it. And, I worked for a company one time and they were computer programmers. And I was the office manager. I reported directly to the president. I was basically, third in command. There were, two people. And the funny thing, it was a fairly small company and there were only me and one other woman, and everybody else there were men. And, that was just the way it worked out. It wasn't, but anytime, and now we do things wrong. We make mistakes. And it was very interesting because the other woman, anytime she figured out I had done something wrong, she got to that president to tattle on me.
Mm.
And it took 5 or 6 times for her to figure out that I'd already gone and reported it, and said, hey, Bob, my boss actually was Bob. Hey, Bob, here's what's happened. And here's what I've done to fix it.
Mhm.
And so she'd go and she'd tattle and he'd look at her like, are you 12? I mean,
Yeah.
and, but I think that is, we have to hold ourselves accountable. And it's okay to brag on ourselves too,
Mhm. Mhm.
but yeah, I think to say I could have done this better
Yeah.
is important for people at whatever level we are at.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The faster you can come clean on, especially when things didn't go well. And I'll just make one small caveat on that one as well. And this is probably more important for any, if you like younger listeners,
Mhm.
is is we don't have to come with the solution anymore,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So
And we might
hey,
not have the
we
solution.
might not have it.
Mhm.
So like there was somebody I was coaching a couple weeks ago, and they had an employee that held back on bringing something forward because they wanted to come with the solution.
Mhm.
But in doing that, they missed a deadline,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so now the problem is compounded
Right.
because A, it's not done, it's
Mhm.
not done on time,
Mhm.
and we still have an unresolved issue. We have a challenge that we're dealing with. So don't delay, right? If you have a challenge, and I'm not saying run into a challenge, run screaming down the
Right.
hall,
Yeah. See
right?
if you might be able to fix it.
But see if you can fix it. And if you think that you need a little bit of time, then go talk to a coworker or go talk to your leader
Mhm.
and let them know. Give them the heads up
Mhm.
because they might have a solution for you,
Mhm.
right? They might have experienced that before.
Mhm.
So, take advantage of
Right.
that.
Right.
Uh,
Mhm.
Manage
And
their
I love that you say
expectations.
they might already have experienced it,
Mhm.
or something similar, because then they can
Mhm.
go, oh, when this happened, we did this.
Right.
Why do we think we have to reinvent the wheel every time?
Yep. Yep.
You
Yep.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Chances are the problem's already been solved out there
right,
somewhere. Yeah.
right. And I think here's the most important thing. When we say, hey, we did something wrong, I screwed up, whatever it is, we somehow think people are going to think less of us.
Mm.
And of course, what happens is they think less of us when we try and hide something.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. We're all learning,
Mhm.
right? And especially now where things are moving so
Mhm.
quickly and there's so
Mhm.
much new technology that's happening.
Mhm.
Our systems are changing every day. Like every other day my phone wants to update itself, right?
I
Like
know.
right?
Mhm.
Like change is
Mhm.
happening at a ridiculous
Mhm.
pace. We're all learning how to use buttons differently that moved overnight or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
Learning is expected nowadays, right? It's not like you have a new system that's come into your workplace and then for the next 12 months we're all good,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
We should expect something different to be happening next week.
Mhm. Right. And speaking of tech, I mean, one of the trickiest things right now is the fact that we have 4, possibly even 5 now, right? Distinct generations of employees that
Mhm.
could be working somewhere. I'm a
Mhm.
baby boomer, but I'm at the tail end of the baby boomer. But then, of course, we have Gen X, we have millennials, we have Gen Z, and then, you can, whatever's after Gen Z, we could conceivably have some of those. And tech is, is for us baby boomers might be very confusing because we didn't grow up with it like
Mhm.
a lot of the younger generations did.
Mhm.
But, we all have different philosophies of
Yeah.
how we're doing. So how on earth do you work with, especially if you're in, a company that's got at least, several of those categories. How do you deal with all of that?
Sure. And I think that's where accountability and managing expectations up front and clearly is where it's all at, right? Like we have to recognize um, that those four generations, most organizations have no more than four in their workspace right now, and that we all have our own strengths, and we all act the same way we all act the way that we act for a reason. And in the generational work that I do, it's I love having those conversations about why is a boomer a boomer,
Right.
why is a millennial a millennial, right? So what are the social experiences that made, 'cause I'm a boomer as well, and that made a boomer the way that we are, right? So our expectations around loyalty are right.
Right. My dad fought in World War II. He had a
Right.
very different philosophy about things.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I like to do is actually have a discussion with the four generations and say, hey, you know, what are the things that were most important to you when you were a kid, right? When you were growing up, what are the things that you experienced, you know? And like millennials will talk to you about the globalization, that they saw the world as one place. When I grew up, I saw the world as the 100,000 people that lived in the town that I grew up in, right? That
We didn't have that thing called the internet.
Right. So our perspective around things were different. And when I've discovered that when a millennial understands the different generations and why a boomer acts the way that a boomer acts and why a Gen Z acts the way that Gen Z acts, and when those generations understand why millennials act the way that they do, that we now have a much better appreciation for the types of responses that we give or expectations that we have. So I can stop blaming a millennial for wanting things to move a lot faster than I'm used to, because now I understand why they expect things to move a lot faster. Millennials can understand why I expect things to be slower and more thoughtful and right, and they can understand that, so they don't have to like beat their head against the wall wondering why, right? They now know why. So because honestly, I don't no matter what generation you're from, I believe we all want to do great work. We all want some autonomy around the work that we do. We all want to be proud of making a difference, right? And we want to do something that's meaningful today.
Right.
And if I can sit back and go, hey, wait a minute, Sue might be from a different generation, but what makes Sue proud? Right? How, like, what's going to be interesting for Sue, right? And if I can pay attention to that more than I can pay attention to how old Sue is, then I'm going to be a way better leader.
Right. And they do bring different skill sets. I was talking to somebody who is the head of sales and marketing for Six Flags, right? One of the big amusement parks. And he was talking about the challenges that he faces because he deliberately wants people from all the generations as part of sales and marketing, because marketing to me is very different than marketing to a 16-year-old. That's just the way it is. But he said it was the funniest thing. He was giving people, hey, this is what I need you to do, yada, yada, yada. And one of the things he told people was, or he told the team was, I need you to call X, whatever it was. And his Gen Z came up and said, I don't know how to make a phone call. And he was just flabbergasted, and we were just talking about that the other day, that a lot of times that generation deletes the phone app off of their phones because, first of all, they want the space, but they don't use the phone. And he certainly had never used a phone where you had button, you picked up the thing and the receiver, and then you typed. He didn't know what to do.
Wow.
But and some of those, they're going to be better uh if you and this is where it is a challenge. They might respond better to text messages. They might want emails, they might want voicemail, and so that's where sometimes it is a little bit challenging.
Hmm.
But you're showing that you value them, right? When you
Hmm.
say, how do you
Hmm.
want me to communicate with you?
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really funny. That's
I
really
know. I was
interesting.
like, somebody didn't know
Right.
how to use a phone.
Right. But see,
But right, that we just make that assumption because we
yeah,
grew up with the phones.
yeah,
um
yeah, yeah. But what a wonderful moment
mhm,
to be able to build trust
mhm,
with your team,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Because in that case, in that
mhm.
circumstance, if the leader, was
Right.
frustrated
Or said, how
or
stupid is that?
right,
Right.
they could have taken so many different angles on that, but instead, if you just sit there for a second and laugh and go, really?
Right.
Wow.
Mhm,
Okay. Right. And and
mhm,
and laugh about it
mhm,
and laugh
mhm,
with the
mhm.
other
Right.
person, and then bring them over and have a joyful experience about
Mhm,
showing them how to
mhm.
use a
Right.
phone.
Mhm,
It like that could be a bonding
mhm.
experience
Right.
that imagine 5 years down the road when they're somewhere else
Mhm,
and they're like, oh yeah, remember Bruce when I was taught
mhm,
that,
mhm.
it could be a really interesting,
Right. Mhm,
joyful, trust
mhm,
building
mhm,
moment.
mhm.
Just somebody having the courage that to come up and say, hey,
Mhm,
I don't know how to use a phone,
mhm. Right.
right?
Mhm,
um uh, so I applaud the leader, right,
mhm,
for building an environment
mhm,
where that person
mhm.
felt that they could go up and
Right.
say,
Not
"Hey,
even,
I don't
how
know."
many
Right?
people would have just tried to do it and maybe been able to do it and not, and Mhm,
Yeah, but I think
mhm,
what a fun
mhm.
opportunity
Right.
to build a
Mhm.
relationship.
Right. Well, and it could have then gone into a team thing for, okay, let's review how we're talking to people.
Mhm.
Are we, the whole thing where they say, if you've got a smile on your face when you're talking to someone,
Yeah.
there's a different tone. Yeah, all of those various things. It could have been, something that everybody was going to benefit from.
Mhm.
And so, but there's also this other big thing, lots of things with multi-generational, but I Googled this earlier today. And I said, what's the average length of time that people stay at a company? And for our Gen Zers, it was under 2 years. For people my age, it was actually, about it was a little under 10 years.
Mhm.
And then,
Mhm.
of course, the others are in between.
Mhm.
How do you deal with the kind of and obviously it depends on what you're doing, how many you've got of each of those, but kind of that continual churning, because we all know that you want people to stay with you as long as possible, is if they're doing a great job, right? Um, and so how do you build that loyalty that, that Gen Zer might say, hey, I'm going to be here for 3 or 4 years or maybe even longer.
Sure. Sure. I think, uh, and I run into this a fair amount. One of the things that I've discovered is that if assuming that I'm the leader, if I'm able to create an environment, a culture around my team, right, that is positive and has a growth
Mhm.
mindset to it, right? Not to use, you know,
The
trendy words
terms.
or yeah, the terms, but if I am able to create an environment, I'm able to expand and extend that loyalty component
Mhm.
uh, in very different ways. So, I am able to get people um, uh, ready to contribute
Mhm.
faster,
Mhm.
right? If I create an environment that is
Mhm.
safe for them to ask questions
Mhm.
and to collaborate with the people
Mhm.
around them. So if I create this bubble, I like to call it a microculture. So like
Mhm.
I can't influence the whole
Mhm.
company, but I can influence my
Mhm.
team.
Right.
So let me create a microculture. And if I can create a microculture team where people are expected to ask questions, people are expected to collaborate, people are definitely going to be safe for their opinion, right? If I can create that place, I can get new people more effective faster. So that's great. I can make them proud of the work and the contribution that not only they're making, but that the team is making, right? And that's going to make them want to stick around a little bit longer because they love the environment that
Right.
we're around. The younger generation, one of the things that the younger generation, and I'm going to pin that as like, let's say 40 and under, right? But for the most part.
Not
So that
me.
but one of the things that they're really looking for, especially earlier in their career, they're looking for experiences,
Yes.
right? And I call it experiences for a reason. I'm not saying education. I'm not saying specific. They're looking for experiences. Now, that experience might be education, right?
A new
But they're
skill.
right. Yeah. So they're looking for a story of a customer that they've worked for, or a story about a project that they've worked on, or something that they've contributed to. So they're looking to grow, right? They're looking to get better at what they're doing. And again, that's why I call it an experience. When I was in their shoes, it was education, right? But now they're really looking for experiences. If I can shift people's experiences in my team, right? If I can make sure that they continually grow and experience something new every 6 months, every 9 months, right? Whether it's being part of another team, right? Whether it's being part of a new project, whether it's inviting them to redefine our team values, right? Because just redefining our team values doesn't necessarily go directly back to their job, but it's an experience that they're going to have, that they are going to feel that they're contributing in. That's what they're looking for. And I can take someone from 2 years to 4 years pretty quickly if I can make them really enjoy being part of that team, and B, feeling like I'm expanding their experiences, so that when they do choose to leave, right, that they can go into a job interview and say, hey, you're right, I did experience a difficult conversation with a coworker. Let me share that with you, and I'll tell you what I did to get over it.
Right.
Because people, when they're interviewing them, they're really wanting them not to share their credentials. They're looking for them to share their experiences, right? So tell me of a time that you had to say no to somebody. I can do that, right? And that is one of the things that I believe that we can do for that generation. Now, the neat thing is that, let's say I'm part of a larger organization. If I create a culture like that, if I can create, and if my overall company has a reputation for creating environments like that, that employee doesn't want to leave the company. They might actually be ready to leave the team.
Right.
Right? So they might leave the team and go to another team. So the company is not losing that experience, that wonderful, hardworking, collaborative, open mindset employee. The company is now transferring them to a different team. And if we don't do that, then they will leave the company.
Right.
Right? So I did a study a bunch of years ago, I'll give it that. I did a study and I asked the younger generation, I said, 2 questions. How long do you expect to be in your job? Right? How long do you want to?
Yes, very different.
Right? And the how long do I expect to be here was roughly 2 years. how long do I want to be here was up in the 5-year range.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
When I asked them, why do they think that they will leave?
Mm-hmm.
It's because they're not getting the recognition that they want.
Mm-hmm.
They're not working in a trusting environment,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not being given opportunities to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the
Mhm.
top
Right.
components
Mhm.
to why I actually am leaving versus why I would love to stick around. And this was millennials, right? That I was basically looking at. It was the millennial uh, uh, demographic.
Mhm.
So yeah, so their expectation is I'm going to be out of here in 2 years.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
and if that's my expectation, what am I going to do? I'm going to gather as much as I possibly
Mhm.
can and stuff it into those 2 years.
Mhm.
Versus if I'm playing the long game and thinking, hey,
Mhm.
I'm going to be part of this team,
Mhm.
this culture for 5,
Mhm.
right? And let's grow and develop.
Right.
Very, very, very different
Mhm.
experiences.
Right. And I love that you talk about team because, as if there's more than one person, it's a team.
Absolutely. Yep.
And and we finally, I hope, gotten past the point of doing the team building exercises that are stupid. I mean, I last time I was in corporate America was a while ago, and I'd been there a month maybe, and we all the new people from the last 3 months or whatever, right, went off site to do these team building exercises. And these were those things where, like, you got up on the stand and you fell over backwards and they caught you, and I'm like, no, I do not know those people. I do not know that they are going to catch me. And there was nothing that anybody could say where I thought, no, and because I did not know them. And now they were certainly not going to drop me on purpose. But, and and those, of course, were the rage where we
Yep.
did all of the offsite things and all those. Now I certainly think that in some cases, maybe if you've got your corporate softball team or whatever, that's great. But of course, as the leader, you also need to keep in mind, okay, maybe Jim is not a good softball player. So let's not embarrass him by making him the softball player. Maybe he's in charge of the beverages or whatever, because you still want him there. Because, but it comes back to what you were saying, recognize what people are good at. But a big part of this comes back to this. It's a little word, but it's a very important word: empathy. And that is one of those things where 5, 10, definitely 10 and longer, a person, whether it was they had a title or they were a leader, they weren't to show empathy because that was a soft skill. And of course, as you've been saying, that's probably one of the most important things. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Empathy, is one of those scary words because it means you have to tap into your feelings,
Right.
right? And we all have to find our own safe place around our feelings, right? And I might want to share a whole lot. You maybe don't want to share a whole lot. And that's where we have to get really comfortable, is saying, hey, you know what? Bruce is a little bit reserved, and that's
That's
okay.
okay.
It's okay. Mary, not so much. You know, Jeffrey, oh my goodness, like I get all of it from Jeffrey, right?
That's me. I'm the
Yeah.
one that on my report cards it says will not shut up.
Yeah. So like we all have to sort of figure out what that looks like. But I, I, I'm really careful around that aspect of empathy, because empathy simply means to me means, hey, you know what, Deb, I care,
Right.
right? I
It doesn't
care.
mean you've experienced it. And I think that's
Nope.
where a lot of people get held up. No.
Yep. Yeah. So sometimes I just need to be sitting there and listening to you and caring. It doesn't mean I have to have experienced it. It doesn't mean I have to believe what you're sharing, right? It doesn't mean I have to buy in, right? But it means that, hey, you know what, Deb, I'm going to respect you enough to listen to you.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that I have to give you my feedback,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that we have to get into a debate. You know, all it means is that, hey, for whatever
Mhm.
the experience is, I have to simply be there and listen to you.
Mhm. Right.
And if I can do that,
Mhm.
then that's the main goal. Now, it might lead to you and I sharing about something.
Mhm. Mhm.
Who knows where it's going to go?
Mhm.
But empathy is really needs to
Mhm.
do is say, "Hey, Deb, I care."
Mhm. Mhm. Right. And
Right?
you have to be real about that, right?
Mhm.
We've all had the people, well, Bruce, tell me more. And then I
Yeah.
look at my phone. All those various things. Nope.
Yep. 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 Absolutely. I am I'm really very sticky about that aspect of communication
Mhm.
where if I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to talk
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
you. I'm going to talk with
Right.
you,
Mhm.
right? And that, hey, maybe that's a team,
Mhm.
but I'm really careful
Mhm.
about you and I connecting, right?
Mhm.
And so my phone's turned off.
Mhm.
I don't wear one of those
Right.
things that
Yeah, my
buzz.
bingy thing here. Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
if someone would give me $1,000 watch
Mhm.
like that,
Mhm.
I would give it back to
Mhm.
them. Like it's not my thing. I don't want something vibrating on my wrist,
Mhm.
right?
Because
And
your instinct is you look, right? It's
right.
Pavlov's
Yep.
dog, right? Oh,
Yep.
the world is
Yep.
ending. We must look.
Yeah, and even if it's vibrating, it's taking my attention away,
Mhm.
right? And so I am really careful
Mhm.
when I'm having a conversation with somebody that my phone doesn't even buzz. Like it says, "Oh, just put it on vibrate."
Mhm.
No, no, no.
Right. Mhm.
It's in another room or it's
Mhm.
in a
Mhm.
desk drawer or something along those lines. It's uh, I'm really careful
Mhm.
about that
Mhm. Right.
communication component,
Mhm.
and especially if you and I are having an important
Mhm.
conversation,
Right.
right? If I'm working away and you
Mhm.
pop into my office about talking, well, that's
Yeah,
different,
then you're
right?
not gonna, yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
But if you and I are having a real
Mhm.
conversation about something, if we're brainstorming something, if we're having a board meeting,
Mhm.
if whatever it might be, if we're having real conversations, then
Mhm.
for me, technology has to go away.
Right.
Now, I'm very careful with that though. So I have a client of mine, and he has ADHD,
Mm.
right? So I recognize that they need different
Right.
things in order to maintain
Mhm.
their attention
Mhm.
and their thought process and their ability to uh,
Mhm.
um, retain the information. So their laptop is open all the way through our meetings,
Mhm.
and he is always like tapping into his
Mhm.
computer.
Mhm.
That's his way of processing
Mhm.
the information. So I recognize that
Mhm.
different people have different
Mhm.
processing
Right.
mechanisms.
Mhm.
So I have to be aware of that.
Mhm.
But again, to me, that's empathy,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
That's empathy.
Right.
That's
Mhm.
respect,
Mhm.
right? It's making space,
Mhm. Right.
and
And
that
it
works.
is, listening to just listen
Yep.
and not to try to fix it unless you've been
Mm.
asked to try to fix it. And I have to be very careful about that because we want to help. We want to, and I don't care if it's personal or business, but yeah, sometimes they just need somebody to listen. I had somebody ask that the other day, and I said she just needs you to listen to her. Don't fix it. Don't, I said, just listen to her.
Mhm.
And she said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, it's the old saying, right? We have one mouth and two ears. Um, you know, we all just need somebody. And I talk to my cat, right? And the nice thing is they don't respond, or when they do, it's like, oh, okay. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
but yeah, it's we're not always being asked to fix it.
No, no, that was a huge thing that I had to learn.
Mhm.
That was
Mhm.
huge for me
Right. Mhm.
that I had to learn that because I grew up in I'm
Mhm.
my whole family,
Mhm.
we're a family of fixers.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not that we don't think they can't do it. Like we said before, maybe I have already done it, been there, have a solution. If they didn't say, "What do you think?" or something, similar to that, then don't offer. Or at least not then. Maybe go
Yep.
back to them and say, "Hey, I've kind of thought about this. Are you open to suggestions?"
Yep. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
but yeah. And I mentioned another word earlier that I love, yeah, and I use the word a lot because I'm type A and I don't like to delegate and all of those various things. But I like to empower people. I know. And for those who are just listening, Bruce just made a face. And so tell us why empower is not the word we should be using.
Right. And it's funny that you saw that with me. Um, I believe everybody out there is already empowered,
Mhm.
right? All I need to do is enable them. And that's
Mm,
the shift
right.
that is in my head
Hmm.
is if I have if the
Hmm.
person is in the right
Hmm.
place, doing the right job,
Hmm.
doing the right type of work, right? So if if if
Hmm.
if they're part of your team,
Hmm.
chances are they're in the right
Right.
place,
Hmm.
right? So it's not, and I'm not saying that I have to tailor every single experience
Hmm.
to an individual.
Hmm.
Hey, this is work.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
Work means this is your job description,
Hmm.
other duties as assigned.
Hmm.
Right. Right. And that honestly, I totally believe that that should be my
Hmm.
expectation coming into work is that I've had that conversation with my
Hmm.
employee
Hmm.
that this is your job
Hmm.
description, other duties as assigned.
Hmm.
Right. But if they're comfortable being part of that
Hmm.
equation, then that to me tells me that they're already empowered,
Hmm.
right? They want to be working
Hmm.
at my tech company.
Hmm.
They want to be working in the marketing department of my bank,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So they're already empowered. And it gets back to what I was sharing earlier with people want to be proud of their work.
Hmm.
They want some autonomy. They want to feel like
Hmm.
they're contributing, that they're making a difference. Those components. If I, as a leader, can focus on that
Hmm.
on my regular basis, they are going to be empowered,
Hmm.
right? What I have to do is enable them. So I have to give them the
Hmm.
environment and the
Hmm.
tools and the
Hmm.
encouragement and the
Hmm.
trust and the
Hmm.
respect that they need
Hmm.
to flourish
Right.
in that
Hmm.
component,
Hmm.
right? Because it's the, you can lead a horse to water, you
Hmm.
can't make them drink,
Hmm.
right? If somebody doesn't want to drink,
Hmm.
I can give them an ocean
Hmm.
of water
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
they don't want to drink,
Right.
right? And that's my difference
Hmm.
between empower
Hmm.
and enable,
Right. Right.
right? That if I have the right person, all I have to do is open the
Hmm.
gates for
Hmm.
them
Right.
and they will.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
my job as a leader
Hmm.
is to make sure that the gates are open.
Hmm. Right. And it's also important, and it comes back to what we were saying at the very start. It's not going to be perfect.
Nope.
Mistakes will be made. And
Hmm.
enabling them gives them the ability to come back to you and say, I need something more. I've got a question about this. Oops, this went wrong. I told somebody one time, I said, did somebody die? No, then it's fixable. Right?
Yeah.
And but yeah, the part of that enabling is letting them know, you know, and of course my big thing, because like I said, I'm very type A, is recognizing that, oh my gosh, they might actually do it better.
I hope
Right?
I hope they do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I want to know, okay, you did it this way. Cool. I always did it this way, but your way is better. Or your way is different or whatever it is.
Yeah. So now I learned something.
Hmm. Right.
Yippee. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
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 Well, oh my gosh, Bruce, this hour has just flown by. I looked down and went, oh my God, we only have 5 minutes left. We have to have you on again because, like I said, this is such an important topic. And I think so many people struggle with it because one of the things that we didn't talk about is, what if you get that big promotion
Mhm.
and you don't know what to do?
Mhm.
And I, there are, and I'm putting this in my air quotes, leadership training. And there are, I mean, part of what we've been talking about is how to be
Yeah.
that leader.
Yeah.
But what if, you're told, okay, you're in charge of this team, you're in charge of this project, and you're thinking, oh dear, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And so, we will have you on again because I think this is obviously something that it is so very important. But for people who have already said, Bruce, I need you. How do they find you, and what are the services that you provide?
Sure. So thanks very much for that, Deb. And like, I think let's do a 4-part series. I love that.
That'll work. That'll work. What's a quarter?
There you go. What's a quarter? I like
Mhm.
that. Um, yeah, a couple different things that they can do to reach out to me. LinkedIn is a great place
Okay.
for me for sure. So Bruce.Mayhew, Mayhew.
Hmm.
If you Google Bruce Mayhew, there's me and a dentist in the UK. So
There's only 3 Deb Creers in the whole world, so.
yeah.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we're pretty solid. I'm not the dentist. Um, so those are two great places
Mhm.
to find me. My website is brucemayhew.com or brucemayhew.ca. So I've got both of those linking to the same place. So those are great avenues
Mhm.
to reach out to me. If you go to the website, you'll find links all over the pages
Mhm.
about contact me. So you just click on one of those, and you'll be great.
Mhm.
So those would be, I guess, the best
Mhm.
places
Mhm.
to
Okay.
contact and get hold of me.
Great.
And of course, there's the book.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
So
And we will
yeah,
have the link to the book on our website, or in the show notes, I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. And
So yeah.
and
Mhm.
and the path to an inspired leader is just such. It was such a pleasure
Mhm.
to put
Mhm.
together, and people
Mhm.
are getting. I'm really happy with the reviews that are coming out of it
Mhm.
because people are saying it's so approachable.
Mhm.
I'm really
Mhm.
thrilled with it.
I love it. We didn't even talk about why you wrote it. So see, part 2, part 3, part 4, whatever we're.
Love it.
But
Love it.
but
Love it.
yeah, it's and again, anybody needs to know what we're talking about.
Mhm.
Whether you're leading your family, many of us now are leading volunteer groups, things like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's very important that we're thinking about this. And maybe it's just like, you and your dogs and cats, well, you're leading them too. Well, I don't know, the cats maybe lead themselves. But yeah, this is something that is so important. But as you said, we are also dealing with people who are leaders. So how can we make it easier for them too? And I think that is something that is very important in this process.
Mhm. Absolutely. I totally, totally, totally
Mhm.
agree.
Great. Well, as I said, we will definitely have you on again. But
Great.
do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Sure. And I have to go back to actually what I posted this morning on my LinkedIn profile, right? And it ties weirdly directly to the conversation that we just had. But yeah, yeah, yeah. But culture isn't a campaign, it's a leadership habit. And that culture is built in small daily moments on the norms that leaders reward, tolerate, model, and repeat every day.
I love it. I love it.
Good.
Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having so much fun getting to know Bruce Mayhew. Can't wait to do it again. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.